The MiTo aims to take everything Alfa Romeo knows about sports car dynamics and distill it into one head-turning premium supermini. Aimed at the Mini, but offering greater practicality, value and high street wow factor, this Italian alternative has been much improved by smarter looks inside and out that build on an impressively frugal range of engines and a uniquely special feel. Can cars that are smaller and more efficient really also be more desirable? Alfa reckons so. It took a long time for us to see a product that properly competed with BMW's Mini. That car proved that European buyers were prepared to pay quite a premium for something three-door and compact, provided it was sporty, stylish and had the right brand cachet. Step forward, Alfa Romeo's MiTo, first announced in 2009 but thoroughly revised in late 2013 to create the car we're going to look at here. 30 years ago, enthusiasts on real-world budgets dreamed of a compact Italian hatchback, packing all of Alfa's heritage and spirit into a 4-metre length, and realised it with the iconic Alfa Sud. Today, this MiTo aims to satisfy their kids in exactly the same way. If you're wondering about the name, well, it combines the first two letters of Milan, where Alfa Romeo was conceived, and Turin, or in Italian Torino, where the cars are currently made. More importantly though, this is a car that returned its brand to the supermini segment, a true successor not only to the Alfa Sud, but also to the iconic junior models of the 60s. But while those cars were Alfa engineered through and through, this one was developed in more constrained times that required it to share the underpinnings and engine wear of Fiat's Punto. Fortunately for potential buyers, the two cars have a very different feel, thanks to the development of MiTo-specific steering, seating, suspension and brakes. The Milanese maker claims that the engines are tuned differently too, and of course there are these unique looks. So far, so good. Early MiTo sales were certainly encouraging, especially after high-tech Multijet 2, diesel and 1.4 litre multi-air petrol units were installed beneath the bonnet from 2010 onwards. By 2013 though, things were tailing off as buyers at the premium end of the small car sector began to be tempted away by direct rivals like Audi's A1 and the prospect of the third generation modern era Mini. Alfa urgently needed to rejuvenate this car. They have. Let's check out the result. So, to what an Alfa Romeo should be about, the driving experience. First impressions are good. You sit lower than you would in most rival superminis, certainly lower than you would in the Fiat Punto that shares this car's basic structure and many of its oily bits. There's a lovely 3-spoke leather-trimmed steering wheel to grip, and ahead of you lie a gorgeous set of deeply cowled instruments. It's a proper driver's cockpit. Beyond that, you'd hope perhaps for an Alfa to have its own unique engine. Sadly, in the modern world, that idea makes no sense at this price point, but the Milanese engineers had done a good job in tweaking the power plants that are available to give them some high-revving, sweet-sounding, Alfa-like character. These days, all these units are turbocharged with a choice of 3 petrol options and 2 diesels in the revised lineup. Let's start with the diesels, 1.3 and 1.6 litre JTDM2 units, offering either 85 or 120 brake horsepower. Now personally, I wouldn't choose a black pump fueled MiTo, but if cost or circumstance meant I had to have one, then I'd opt for the far more efficient 1.3 litre version. Thanks to a meaty 200 Nm of torque, it pulls lustily from lower speeds with overtaking capability more potent than the 12.9 second 0 to 62 mph sprint time would suggest. Go for the 1.6 litre variant and you're looking at rest 62 mph in 9.9 seconds on the way to 123 mph. But don't go the diesel route before checking out what petrol-engined MiTo models have to offer. Here I'm trying the version that's arguably the cleverest in the range, the entry-level 2-cylinder 0.9 litre twin-air variant, which in this improved lineup gets a 20 brake horsepower shot in the arm to take its output to 105 brake horsepower, enough to properly compete with its arch-rival, the Mini 1. That's still not sufficient to make this car especially quick, thanks in part to a fairly porky curb weight of 1,130 kilograms. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 11.4 seconds, en route to 114 miles an hour. Having said that, there are other virtues on offer to compensate for the lack of outright speed. The efficiency stuff we'll get to later on in this film, but here I want to concentrate on the sound. After all, this certainly isn't what you'd call a quiet power plant. Quite the opposite, in fact, offering a distinct but not unpleasant roar under strong acceleration that feels very Alfa-like. If you simply want refined urban motoring, then you might not like it at all, but then, in that case, you probably wouldn't even be considering this car in the first place. If, on the other hand, you need an efficient little runabout but still have a little red mist pumping through your veins, I could imagine that you might like it very much indeed. Providing, that is, you don't mind thrashing this engine quite hard to make decent progress. This unit, after all, doesn't get into its stride until about 3,000 RPM. If having to rev the thing that hard for decent forward motion isn't for you, then you're likely to be much happier opting for the petrol alternative to twin-air MiTo motoring, namely a variant with the Fiat Group's clever 1.4 litre multi-air engine, offered with either 135 or 170 brake horsepower. True, this unit is no longer the class-leading power plant it was when first introduced to the MiTo lineup back in 2010, but it still offers a decent balance between economy and performance, with plenty of diesel-like pulling power at low to medium engine speeds. This and the close ratio gearbox is just what you need for getting swiftly around town. Most will opt for this unit in 135 bhp guise, where it delivers rest to 62 miles an hour in 8.4 seconds on the way to 129 miles an hour. There's also the option in this variant, and in this variant only, of Alfa's smooth dual-clutch 6-speed TCT automatic transmission as an alternative to the slick-shifting 6-speed manual box. To go quicker in this car means opting for the faster of the two 1.4 litre multi-air units, the 170 brake horsepower engine found in the rarely seen top-of-the-range QV or Quadrifoglio Verde hot hatch model. Now, it's tempting to dismiss this variant out of hand in the modern-day shopping rocket market. After all, for the same kind of money, you could up your power output to nearly 200 brake horsepower in rivals like the Mini Cooper S, the Peugeot 208 GTI, or a Renault Sport Clio. But speed isn't everything, and there's still nothing else in this sector quite like this MiTo QV's active suspension setup, known in Alfa speak as SDC, or Synaptic Damping Control. To be frank, it's a very welcome feature on this top variant, for the ride quality you get in standard MiTo models really can be rather over firm and crashy, even with the passive dual rate suspension that's included on all 1.4 and 1.6 litre versions. Would that SDC active suspension was fitted across the range, or at least could be specified as an option. So how does it work? Well, based on the road surface and driver input, sensors around the car automatically adjust the dampers to enhance both handling and grip, with the same information further used to tweak both steering and braking via the MiTo's VDC stability control package. This active suspension setup can be fine-tuned via a feature that really is this MiTo's pièce de résistance, the DNA selectable driving mode system that's fitted as standard across the lineup for quick driver control of throttle and transmission response, power steering assistance, stability control, and in the case of the TCT automatic model, gear change timings too. The initials stand for dynamic, normal and all weather, and these three settings are accessible via this 3-position rocker switch that's rather tucked away behind the gear lever. You really need to have it set in dynamic all the time for mainstream versions of this car to have any real get up and go. So it's useful that in this revised model, when you restart the car after previously turning it off and walking away, it reverts back to whatever mode you were using last. Unlike some systems of this sort, you don't need to be a professional driver to notice the difference it makes, especially if you're driving a twin air or multi-air model where, courtesy of an extra overboost effect for the turbo, switching to dynamic mode really makes the car wake up and take an interest in the road ahead. In this twin air, torque is boosted from 120 to 145 Newton meters when you select dynamic. Now, waking up and taking an interest in the road ahead is something I'm assuming that all potential MiTo customers will want to do at least some of the time. To help in this regard, Alfa have turned to some sophisticated electronics to try and further set their car apart. The first I'm not totally sure about. The DST, or Dynamic Steering Torque System, is supposed to give a counter-steering effect to combat oversteer and help maintain an even course through quick corners. No doubt it does, but the whole electric setup feels rather over-assisted and somewhat vaguer than I'd expect from a car of this kind. Much better thought out is the use across the range of Alfa's clever Q2 differential, which diverts engine torque to the wheel that has the grip to use it, so uselessly spinning wheels aren't a part of hard cornering. The brakes are very effective too, and you won't have to overuse them into bends as body roll's well controlled. Enter your favourite corner too fast, and there's also a CBC, that's cornering brake control system, to discharge the pressure at each wheel and maintain vehicle stability. Most cars have some kind of styling brand identity, but with an Alfa, the whole design has a unique look that could belong to no other marque, and it's one you'll either love or hate. The front end ought to look a little awkward, the shield-shaped front grille with its serpent-eating baby badge pushing the number plate awkwardly to its left. For me though, somehow it all just works, with rounded jewel-like front and rear lights perfectly setting off sleek aerodynamic bodywork derived from Alfa's 450 brake horsepower 8C Competizione supercar. As before, this remains a 3-door only shape, and at first glance, little seems to have changed in comparison to the car we were first presented with back in 2009. True Alfisti who care to peer a little closer though will notice the improvements visited upon this enhanced model. The small but subtle changes made to the chromed front grille, the titanium grey headlamp and tail lamp surrounds, the tinted rear windows and the sports rear bumper. The same mantra of careful improvement has also been applied to the cabin, with its revised dashboard, smarter steering wheel, more supportive seats and upgraded plastics. Make sure you avoid the odd, unfortunately optional, black to red fading dashboard finish though, in favour of the more muted grey to black finish that I have here. Get beyond that and the first thing you'll notice upon entry is the freshly installed 5-inch Uconnect colour touchscreen infotainment system with its voice recognition, Bluetooth and optional sat-nav features. This setup also supports text-to-speech and audio streaming technologies, and, if a little belatedly, brings this small Alfa properly into the modern era. Otherwise, things are much as before. If you're going to pay premium money for something this small, then you want it to feel pretty special inside as well as out. And the MiTo doesn't disappoint. The main dials are hooded in true Alfa style, and the optional carbon fibre look dashboard covering is part of a variety of racy trim materials employed to impressively upmarket effect. It's a comfortable driving environment too, unlike Alfas of old, though there is the small caveat of a reduction in headroom when the optional sunroof is specified. It's a little awkward to get into the rear, and once there, space for head and legs remain necessarily restricted, but a couple of adults on shorter journeys can be reasonably comfortable, and 2 children will be fine. At a pinch, you could even fit 3 youngsters in, were it not for the fact that, rather annoyingly, for a family man like me, there are only 2 seat belts back here, or at least there are in standard form. A third is on the options list. On the plus side, there's certainly more room than you'd find in a rival third-generation modern-era Mini hatch. Talking of Minis, let's compare the 2 cars in terms of luggage space. Lift the rear hatch, the badge neatly doubles as a boot release, and you'll find that this Alfa's 270-litre cargo bay is around 25% larger than the space its Oxford-built competitor can offer, though the opening you must use to access that room is rather narrow, with a very high loading lip to lump stuff over. As usual, you can extend the capacity on offer by pushing forward the rear seat, though the usual split folding arrangement you'd expect is rather meanly offered at extra cost. Expect to pay somewhere in the £14,500 to £19,000 bracket for your MiTo, a 3-door only lineup that includes a choice of 5 main turbocharged engines, 3 of them petrol, 2 of them diesels. In the petrol lineup, nearly everyone opts for either this 0.9 litre twin air model or the 1.4 litre TB multi-air variant. With comparable trim, there's only £1,000 between the two. You'll choose the twin air if you prioritise efficiency, and the multi-air if you care more about performance. It's as simple as that. It's a similar story when it comes to the diesels. With comparable trim, there's only around £1,200 between 1.3 and 1.6 litre versions of the JT-DM2 unit. The 1.3 is far more frugal. The 1.6 is far more responsive. Each car will have its own very definite appeal, just as the brand itself does. If you want automatic transmission, you'll have to choose the 1.4 TB multi-air 135 petrol unit, where the TCT auto gearbox is a £1,250 option. On to the value proposition that MiTo pricing represents. What else might also take the interest of a customer looking at one of these? Certainly not ordinary versions of your everyday mainstream Fiesta or Corsa class supermini. These wouldn't offer the premium sporty feel a potential Alfa buyer would be looking for. It's also unlikely that a MiTo buyer would want to stretch to the £20,000 budget required for family hatch-sized compact models with posh badges, cars like BMW's 1 Series, Mercedes A-Class and Audi's A3. Alfa targets those cars with its larger Giulietta. No, I think that once you've taken everything into account, there are really only 4 other comparably priced contenders delivering a similar proposition to what's on offer here. The first of these you'll probably already be considering if you're shopping in this segment, the third-generation modern-era Mini, certainly the MiTo's closest competitor in terms of ethos, price and sportiness. A Mini will save you a few £100 over this Alfa, but it offers less equipment, less space in the rear and a boot that's 25% smaller. All of which might cause you to turn your attention to a slightly more practical, similarly sized premium supermini rival, Audi's A1. Here, most of the pricing's comparable and the space stacks up, but to get the same special sporty feel that you'll find in this MiTo, you'd have to upgrade your A1 from sport to racier S-Line trim, and that'd set you back over £3,000 more. So if for you a Mini's too small and the littlest Audi you can buy is too expensive, are there other options you could consider? Possibly. I'm going to pick out a couple of more mainstream models that, like this car, are sporty, trendy, 3-door only products, specifically price and position targeted at a MiTo kind of buyer. Citroen's dynamically fashionable DS3 hatch and the FR version of Seat's Ibiza SC. The Citroen has a more bespoke feel. The Seat offers a little more performance. Go for a petrol variant in either case and you can expect to save just over £1,000 over the cost of a comparable MiTo. Diesel variants, though, are very comparably priced to this Alfa. But in either case, would you really feel the same pride of ownership you get by having one of these on your driveway? I doubt it. Finally, I should say a word about the rarest MiTo variant, the 170 brake horsepower QV, or Quadrifoglio Verde, hot hatch model. Here is the ultimate expression of what this car can be. But the £19,000 asking price pitches this top small Alfa into the same kind of pricing ballpark that would not only get you the significantly faster Mini Cooper S, but also quicker mainstream hot hatch models like Peugeot's 208 GTI, top versions of Ford's Fiesta ST and the Renault Sport Clio. In other words, you've really got to want an Alfa to buy it. No, it's further down the range that for the right kind of buyer, this MiTo really could be seen as a tempting proposition. If you agree, and you're at the stage of seriously considering this car, then you're going to want to know how generous the Italian brand has been in specifying this model. The answer to that question is that most of what you'd expect is included, plus a few extra things that'll come as a very pleasant surprise. So, even in an entry-level trimmed variant, you can expect to find alloy wheels of at least 16 inches in size, front fog lights, a rear spoiler, dark tinted rear windows and power heated mirrors. Inside there's climate control, leather trim for the steering wheel and gear knob, a trip computer, plus a Uconnect infotainment touchscreen system with 5-inch colour display, aux-in and USB inputs, and Bluetooth phone compatibility. There's also the clever DNA vehicle dynamic control setup, though unless you specify a top QV variant, it can't influence the ride of the car. As you might expect, you've also to stretch a little further up the range for the touches that'll really set this car apart. Things like smarter 17 or 18-inch alloy wheels, red painted brake calipers, sports instruments, a chromed exhaust pipe, and aluminium for the pedals and door kick plates. Plus, of course, there's plenty on the options list to tempt downsizers with a bit of extra spare cash. I'd want to look at some of the features fitted to this car. A visibility pack that gives you auto headlamps and wipers, plus an electrochromic anti-dazzle rearview mirror. Those would be nice, but what I'd really want is the 8-speaker Bose audio system, the carbon fibre effect dashboard, and the gorgeous Frau leather upholstery with its white piping and green stitching. As a family man, I'd also want to pay the extra Alfa asks for the split folding rear seat and third rear seat belt, those features that really ought to be standard. And safety, well, a 5-star Euro NCAP crash test rating is justified by the way that all MiTo variants get 7 airbags, Isofix child seat fastenings and anti-whiplash head restraints. Spend a little extra and you can get a tyre pressure monitoring system, and for clearer nighttime driving, buy xenon headlamps. Standard across the range is all the usual electronic assistance you would expect. Primarily, that means VDC, or Vehicle Dynamic Control, the stability system which, along with ASR anti-skid control and CBC cornering brake control, will help you out in slippery conditions, or if you enter a corner too fast. VDC also oversees an anti-lock braking setup that flashes your hazard warning lights in panic stops to warn following motorists. There's also a hill holder clutch to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. It was hard to know which MiTo variant to choose when it came to this film. Eventually, I settled upon the one that best exemplifies the passion and efficiency this car can now offer, the most affordable petrol twin-cylinder twin-air variant. It was first launched in 2012 with the same 85 brake horsepower engine used in Fiat's 500, but that wasn't quite up to the job of taking on this version's closest rival, the 102 brake horsepower 3-cylinder 1.2 litre Mini 1, which is why in this revised MiTo lineup the twin-air technology has been massaged a little to boost power up to 105 brake horsepower without noticeably affecting running costs. These see 67.2 miles to the gallon theoretically achievable on the combined cycle and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2. and all with the same raughty, emotive engine note that we had before. To be frank, real-world ownership feedback suggests that you'll have to be either very light-footed or very lucky to see over 65 miles to the gallon from this car in normal motoring on an everyday basis. But the important thing is that the government believes Alfa's quoted stats, which is why, if you decide to buy this particular MiTo variant, the figures that I've just given you will have a big impact on your cost of ownership bottom line. Retail buyers will pay no road tax, while business customers will be even better off, qualifying for the lowest 10% benefit in kind company car taxation rate and saving the 3% premium they'd have to pay for an equivalent sub 100 grams per kilometre diesel model. Thanks to the 100% capital allowance on cars with CO2 emissions this low, companies will also be able to write off the whole cost of the vehicle in the first year, rather than at the rate of 20% per year, bringing down the amount subject to corporation tax and significantly reducing a company's liability. Key to the technological cleverness behind this car's twin-air engine is the start and stop system that cuts the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. All the other variants in the range also get it, including the Pokia 1.4 litre TB multi-air units. These are much less frugal than the twin-air power plant, the 135 brake horsepower version, managing 50.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 129 grams per kilometre, though these figures are fractionally better if you specify the TCT automatic gearbox. So a 1.4 litre MiTo can't get near the figures of a rival Mini Cooper, but it's very comparable with the kinds of returns you'd get from other direct competitors, like Audi's A1 1.4 TFSI or Citroen's DS3 1.6 VTI 120. If you want more power from your 1.4 litre multi-air MiTo, then you'll not be hit by too much of a running cost penalty by choosing the 170 brake horsepower Quadrifoglio Verde hot hatch variant. Now, this model manages 47.1 miles to the gallon and 139 grams per kilometre. As for the JTDM2 diesels, well, I'd think twice before choosing the 1.6. Its returns, 64.2 miles to the gallon and 114 grams per kilometre, are way off the class best. The feebler 1.3 litre diesel variant, though, in contrast, provides arguably the cheapest way that you can drive a car of this kind, delivering 80.7 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 90 grams per kilometre of CO2. What else? Well, there are a variety of service plans to keep maintenance costs down. And residuals? Well, these may not be quite up to Mini or Audi A1 levels, but demand for used MiTo models has proven strong, and there's no reason to assume that it will tail off as this first generation version reaches the latter years of its production run. This relatively beefy residual value has been a big draw for private buyers, especially when the cost of comparatively mundane rivals such as the Vauxhall Corsa and the Ford Fiesta has steadily crept up to match the MiTo's asking price. Insurance groupings in the petrol range are pitched at 13 for this twin-air variant, 19 for the 1.4 litre multi-air 135 model, and 26 for the Quadrifoglio Verde hot hatch. Diesel buyers pay at Group 11 for the 1.3 and Group 19 for the 1.6. As for peace of mind, well, you get the usual 3-year unlimited mileage warranty covering parts, materials and labour, plus 3 years of AA contact support, which includes 24-hour roadside assistance, home start, Relay Plus, European cover, accident management, plus access to travel information, legal advice and technical information. Will this be remembered as a classically charismatic Alfa Romeo? Possibly not. Take a drive in the Milanese brand's brilliant 4C Roadster if you want one of those. But that's an uncompromising poster car, not an especially profitable one. This MiTo, in contrast, must play a fundamental role in keeping its company afloat by appealing to a much broader palette of automotive tastes in the premium supermini segment. Individual enough to keep dyed-in-the-wool Alfisti folk happy, it must at the same time be accessible enough for a new generation of buyers simply looking for style and performance in a compact, practical package. A difficult balance to strike. As to the result, well, it depends on how emotionally detached you can be when it comes to your purchasing decision. Assess this car against, say, a rival Audi A1 using a cold, clinical scorecard, and your money would probably go Ingolstadt's way. But in return, you get a cold, clinical piece of compact automotive real estate. And if you think life's too short for that kind of thing, I'd find it hard to disagree. Yes, this car is far from perfect. Alfa knows the build, the ride and the steering will all need to be better in a second-generation MiTo design. But models from this Milanese maker never were perfect. Loyal buyers stuck with them because they looked and sounded great and felt more special than anything else of comparable price. Observations which are still true here, and qualities emphasised by this much improved post-2013 model with its plusher cabin, smarter looks and pokier twin-air engine. You could see how someone looking at a upmarket Fiesta or Corsa but seeking something just as efficient but with a dash of extra pizzazz could be really taken with one. Something with a bit of heart, something with a bit of style, something with a bit of Latin spirit. The Alfa legend lives on.